In this episode, we talk about the concerns that the Election Commission has raised about the one nation, one election idea. We also talk about the arrest of a man in connection with infiltrating the Indian Army's database. But first, we talk about the legendary Indian cricketer Bishan Singh Bedi. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. On Monday, the former Indian cricket captain and legendary spinner Bishan Singh Bedi passed away at the age of 77 after a prolonged illness and hospitalization. Bedi, who is widely considered as one of the best left-arm spinners, had participated in a total of 67 test matches, secured 266 wickets for India, and led the country to 6 test match victories, including memorable wins in the West Indies and Australia. But besides this, Bedi was also a voice of wisdom, someone who was not afraid to speak his mind and take a stand on matters he believed in. Now to talk about Bedi's career and why he was considered the moral voice of Indian cricket, joining us is Indian Express's sports editor Sandeep Dwivedi. Sandeep, Bedi is considered one of the greatest bowlers India has ever seen. What would you say made his style so unique?
See, if you actually look at Bishan Singh Bedi, which I'm sure cricket fans of this generation won't have seen, there are a few grainy black and white visuals on the internet about him, then he would come across as a very innocuous bowler who would just amble in, not the fittest of player, and he would just come and just roll his arm. But actually, people who faced him, he seems the most difficult and the most deceptive bowler. A very graceful kind of a bowling style he had. An action which was so natural, as if he was not doing anything which was taught. But more than the bowling style, Bedi's bowling was all in his mind. It was all about deception. You might see it's a very simple, well-flighted ball sitting on the sidelines. You would think that, okay, even I can whack that ball. But even the best of batsmen around the world could not do it because there was so much spin into that thing. There was so much drift into the ball. There was so much thought into the ball. Bedi would at times love batsmen who would go for him. He would love a batsman who would hit him for a six because he always said that if he's hit me for a six, I have a scope. He thinks that he can hit me for a six. But the next ball would be such a deadly ball that, he would get him out.
Right, and I'll just quote our colleague Sandeep Gopal, who, talking about his bowling style, wrote that his ball in flight suspended time. In half a second, a benign red sphere became an object of violence. He turned from Gandhi to Terminator. And this really was a challenge for so many batsmen. Could you talk about what his contemporaries have said about him?
Yeah, exactly. They all talk about this wonderful action, the grace on the field. That was massive. And see, there's this one line which I wrote in his obit today that was Tony Lewis, and this is an English cricketer and a BBC Test match special broadcaster. They have a way with words, so I'll just narrate what he said. A clockmaker would have been proud to set both Bedi in motion, a mechanism finely balanced, cogs rolling silently and hands sweeping in smooth arcs across the face. That was Bedi. He would make people lyrical and he would make a normal guy into a poet the way he bowled. So that was his art. He was very easy on the eye but very difficult to bat. That was Bedi.
And Sandeep, besides Bedi as a bowler, there was also Bedi as a person. Talk about what he was like off the field.
Incredible human being. As in, I haven't met such a gregarious and open-hearted, a generous man like Bishan Singh Bedi. And such humility he had for somebody who was so wise, somebody who had achieved so many things in life, for somebody who was interacted with the prime ministers, the presidents, the top people around the world. But he could be as generous to a cub reporter, and he would give that same kind of respect to anybody who would come and speak to him. He was that kind of a guy. Bedi always wanted to talk about cricket, and in case if you engaged him on the game, Bedi would spend hours with you, and such an entertaining, a great narrator of stories, a great sense of humor.
Right, and just to illustrate that, we're just going to play Bedi narrating an incident of him being in Pakistan.
तो वहाँ मुझे एक मौका मिला. I was reading the Dawn in Karachi. Front page पे ना छोटा सा ब्लॉग था. Somebody was asking for a particular blood, which is my blood group, and I was a donor then. So I rang them up. I said, अगर आपको हिंदुस्तानी खून से इतराज नहीं है तो आ जाओ, ले जाओ प्लीज. वो आ गए डॉक्टर लोग. आगे देखा तो who I was, then they said, "You want to give it to the media?" I said, "No, I'm not doing it for that purpose. But somebody requires it. I'm a donor. I have read this. तो आप ले जाओ." खैर वो बात चुप रहने वाली तो नहीं थी. So it was flashed all over Pakistan. General Zia was so impressed. उसने मुझे Persian carpet, this silver cutlery, and he would gift me all those things. But I promise you, just by donating 1 pint of blood in Pakistan, I had entire Pakistan at my feet, literally. कोई टैक्सी में बैठो, कोई सामान खरीदने जाओ, पैसे नहीं लेते थे. Well, पूछने वाले काफ़ी थे, यार बेदी साहब कमाल, तुसी बड़े पॉपुलर थे. मैंने कहा नहीं यार, क्या ये अल्लाह का रहम है. ओ नहीं जी, आप यहाँ अगर इलेक्शन लड़ो तो आप ईमान से आप जीत जाओ. तो मैंने कहा इलेक्शन होते हैं यहाँ. मैंने इलेक्शन होते हैं.
See, he is a very unique kind of a character in Indian cricket. Like, Indian cricket hasn't seen anybody like this. He had opinion about everything. He kept in touch with history. If he didn't understand something, he would call a journalist to understand that issue. Like, if he wanted to take a political stand or if he was confused about something, he would like to debate these things and then he would give his comments.
Right, and Bedi was extremely outspoken. He did not hesitate to take a political stance. Michael Holdings, the former Jamaican cricketer, wrote in the paper saying that Bedi was the greatest moral voice of Indian cricket. Talk about what made him say that.
See, for a cricketer, for a former cricketer, especially from that era, when there wasn't that much money, it is very easy to toe the line of the people in BCCI or the government of the day, because there are very plush posting which you could get. You could get a very cushy commentator's job and get paid well. You could be a selector somewhere. You could be an administrator somewhere. It is so easy. But Bedi never ever believed in these kind of things. And that is the reason, like, even the people in power were very wary of him. Like, in case if Bedi was part of a selection committee, he could never be co-opted. If he doesn't like anything, he will say there, right there. He was not part of a coterie. So that's what made Bedi very different. Like, a simple example was the stadium in Delhi, Firozshah Kotla. The Firozshah Kotla had a stand named after Bishan Singh Bedi, right? But when he came to know that a politician, Arun Jaitley, his statue was coming there and the stadium was going to be named after him, Bedi was the first one who wrote a letter to the Delhi cricket administrator saying that please remove my name from the stands. I don't want to be part of a stadium which is named after a politician. And it wasn't just rhetorical. He had a very calculated and a cool cricketing logic to it. He's saying that a cricket stadium should be named after a cricketer. In case if Mr. Jaitley was a great parliamentarian, then his statue should be outside the parliament. And I have no doubt about that he was a great politician. So his space is outside the parliament. And in case if he wants to be in Kotla, his space is in a glass cabin, not in a statue or on the plaque outside the stadium.
Yeah, and he was really not afraid to call things out, whether it was biased umpiring in an ODI against Pakistan, accusing John Lever of using Vaseline to swing the ball, or even protesting against West Indies for intimidatory bowling tactics. And he even made his opinion about IPL clear, saying that he did not like players being treated like horses, being sold to the highest bidder. Sandeep, did he face any consequences for being this outspoken?
Yeah, he definitely did. Like, if you ask me, he's one of the smartest cricketing brain around in the country, and Indian cricket would have used him much more wisely and aptly. See, the problem with people like Bedi is they will tell you, but there are very few people left in Indian cricket today who would exactly do that. So administrators need to understand that once in a while, you also need people who will tell you the truth or who will compel you to look at the flip side. And that was Bedi. So Bedi was, see, if you look at the administrators, or they always like somebody, an establishment man who would toe everybody's line. He would not object. See, right now, IPL, if you ask me, IPL is at a very difficult phase for cricket with this IPL and T20 coming in. You never know like how IPL will kill every other format, be it the test matches or the ODI, the World Cup which is happening right now in India. For all you know, this could be the last ODI World Cup because T20 with T20 and so many leagues coming around the world, there will be no place for there. The scheduling will be way too tight and test match and ODI are the things which would. So I'm saying at this juncture, at this crossroad, you would need somebody like Bedi to be around. he would need somebody like Bedi in the establishment who can have a debate with you. In case if there is too much of T20 cricket, he would be the one guy in the room, despite the fact the room would be full of very powerful politicians or businessmen or lawyers. But Bedi was that one strong cricketing voice who would have stood up and said that no, this is getting way too much. We also need to look after the other sport, the classical form of cricket, because that is the mother sport and that is the reason, like that's what even the players want to play for. So he was that very strong voice of the player, and he could have made the difference. As there's this one thing which I always say, that he was the conscious keeper of Indian cricket, and it's a massive loss for Indian cricket with Bedi's demise.
And Sandeep, what do you think he will be most remembered for?
See, sadly, he will be remembered as an outspoken anti-establishment guy, but that was one part of it. The only thing is because there hardly anybody in Indian cricket who was of that stature of he could say things which only Bedi could have. So he gets remembered for this guy who would speak most the uncomfortable truth. But a fact remains that he had a big role to play even as a cricketer, what he did on the field. See, he was that one articulate guy in that era, among the very few articulate English-speaking guys we had, who would stand up to the opposition, be it England or in West Indies, whatever. He could talk to the people there. He was the classic brand ambassador of Indian cricket, who was a suave guy. He was articulate. He could speak their language. He could challenge them. So he was the one who got Indian cricket respect. Plus, as a spinner, he was the one who gave Indian cricket the template to play how cricket should be. He made India realize their strength. It was because of the spinners of him and his era that India figured out that spin could be our strength. And till date, it remains our strength. Okay, like we have had of late good fast bowlers, but if you ask anybody in Indian cricket or anybody internationally, they will always tell you that India is the land of great spinners. And Bedi was the guy who started this legacy along with three others, like the famous spin quartet, Bedi, Chandra, Prasanna, Venkat. So they were the guys who etched in stone that in India, if you have to win, you have to face these deadly spinners. And till date, if you just come back to our World Cup, I think barring the last match against New Zealand, our main wicket taker was a spinner, a very skillful spinner in Kuldeep Yadav, right? So he was again a very magical, mysterious left arm leggy, right? So again, like this legacy continues, and it's been years since Bedi last played his cricket game in the 80s. Till today, India's legacy remains spin, and it is all thanks to people like Bishan Singh Bedi.
And next we talk about one nation, one election. The idea that elections at the national, state and local levels should take place at the same time. For the past decade, this idea has been talked about a lot, especially by the NDA government. It has been mentioned in the president's speech, a parliamentary committee has examined it, and currently it is being looked at by the Law Commission, which is likely going to support this idea. Now recently, sources told the Indian Express that the Election Commission, which is in charge of conducting free and fair elections in the country, in its report to the Law Commission, has flagged issues related to logistics and feasibility when it comes to simultaneous elections. We now speak to Indian Express's Ritika Chopra, who broke the story for the paper. Ritika, first tell us, what is the idea behind implementing one nation, one election? What will it involve?
The idea, of course, is this, we all know all elections happen once in 5 years, unless, of course, a government falls. But what's happening right now is that most states have their elections held separately. Of course, some of them are clubbed, but, almost every year we, on an average, there are about 5 to 7 states which go to elections. And of course, a Lok Sabha election, which is again held once in 5 years. But what happens is that we are, or at least it's perceived to be, that we are constantly in election mode, where we have some election or the other every year. And the idea that the proposal is to sync all of these elections. That is, to not have elections every year, but sort of to sync the election calendar in a way that all the elections, all the state elections and the Lok Sabha election, they're all held together. The hope is that this would free up resources and bring down expenditure. And of course, not interrupt governance as it is perceived to be.
Right, the NDA government has said that it doesn't want to be in election mode constantly, and that this idea will help bring down the expenditure that is incurred during campaigning. Now, Ritika, in some sense, one nation, one election has been a contentious idea. Could you talk about what the Election Commission has said in the past about it?
So the Election Commission is not opposed to the idea of simultaneous elections. It has always said, in all its submissions to different committees, even to the Law Commission, it has cited the fact that, look, the first 3 to 4 elections and state assembly elections as well as the Lok Sabha, they went to polls simultaneously. So it's not as if it's something that hasn't happened. It's unprecedented, hasn't happened before in our country. And the Commission has in fact supported the idea, but with a huge caveat. The caveat here being that the Commission says as long as my logistical needs are fulfilled, and as long as the government in power or government of the day can muster political will or rather even garner political support for the idea and with the necessary constitutional amendments, I will do it. When it comes to it, essentially the institution is on board as far as conducting simultaneous elections is concerned.
Right, but as you reported, it has flagged issues related to logistics to the Law Commission. Talk about what these issues are.
So what the Commission has said in its submission to the Law Commission, which is, we're told, almost set to submit its report, it has told the Law Commission that we would need sort of an advance, or they need significant lead time. What we mean by that, it's not as if, if the idea is announced today and say in the next 2 to 3 months, all elections, that the Commission will be able to hold all of them together. It doesn't work like that. So the Commission has been careful to underline that while we are on board, let us flag a few concerns. And of course, one of the concerns is that there is this huge challenge in, even without, if you leave aside simultaneous elections, even without that, the Commission is having a lot of trouble meeting its needs for the electronic voting machines for the upcoming Lok Sabha election in 2024. And that is on account of this global shortage in semiconductors and chips. This is sort of an important part, pretty much essential to produce an electronic voting machine or a VVPAT, which is essentially a machine which gives you proof of it helps you verify whether your vote has been cast correctly.
And right now, the EVMs that are used in the Lok Sabha elections, the same EVMs are used in the state elections as well?
Yes, of course, because it's the same body which is conducting elections both for Lok Sabha and Assembly. It's just that it's obvious that if all elections were to go together, right now the Commission's current stock of EVMs is clearly not enough to hold elections to all states and the Lok Sabha together. They have a fixed stock which enables them to say hold Lok Sabha with a few states simultaneously. Or, it's just enough to kind of, because it's not just the exact number of EVMs, they need to maintain reserve as well in case the EVMs malfunction, which they often do. These are machines. But yeah, coming back to the challenge that they have underlined, they've been categorical about this. They have flagged the fact that there is a huge global shortage of chips and semiconductors. We are having trouble meeting our current orders that we have already placed for Lok Sabha elections. So if elections were to be held simultaneously, they've given a projection, sort of a shortfall, and how much money do they need to meet that shortfall. And they have requested that they need a significant lead time. And that lead time would be anything between 6 months to a year.
Yeah, and apart from the logistical challenges, there are also going to be constitutional challenges. The constitution would have to be amended. And even though we know that the Law Commission is likely going to support this idea, could you talk about the concerns that the opposition parties have raised about this idea? Because right now the NDA and the Biju Janata Dal, for example, are in the favor of it. But what about the other parties?
One thing, of course, that's common amongst the parties that are opposed to the idea is that this would eventually favor the national parties over regional parties, that this would give a significant edge or advantage to a national party. Not but the national parties who will be also fighting elections, at the same time for seats in the Lok Sabha as well as seats in an assembly. So the impression is, and honestly, it's not just an impression, this is backed by data. There is a report by a think tank. And the think tank report essentially says that almost 80% of state elections that were held along with Lok Sabha elections, the results of the state elections are pretty much same as the Lok Sabha elections. So that, essentially usi wave ya usi hawa mein log beh gaye hain. And that even if there was a gap of say 6 months between a state election and a Lok Sabha election, then that percentage of the National Party winning the state and assembly comes down to 67%. So there is data to show that yes, maybe if elections are held around the same time, there are doubts if the reporter is discerning enough to tell or rather to vote for two different parties for the Lok Sabha as well as the Assembly. And that's essentially the major concern, that this may put the regional parties, and as you know, there are many regional parties which are in power in different states, that are, if not in power, then at least they are sort of kingmakers, or, they wield significant influence in their respective states, that this would put them at a significant disadvantage. That's the major concern.
Right, and in this regard, Odisha's Biju Janata Dal has been an exception, because Odisha has been going to the polls alongside the Lok Sabha elections. Talk about what makes it an exception.
So, for the benefit of our audience, if I can just describe, when a state election is held along with a Lok Sabha election, that voter goes to the same polling booth. The only difference being that he or she will enter room A and cast his or her vote in favor of whichever party he or she wants to for the Lok Sabha, comes out, goes to room B and then casts his or her vote again, but this time for, say, the assembly. So, if you look at Odisha's example, that's kind of proof that the voter is pretty discerning, because it has that same voter in Odisha went into room A, cast his vote in favor of Biju Janata Dal, came out, went to room B, and then cast his vote in favor of, another party. So, their results were pretty different. It's not as if the voter ended up voting for the same party, both for Lok Sabha and for the state assemblies election. So, which is something the Election Commission has always maintained, that, you need to have more faith in your voters' intellect. The electoral democracy of India is pretty mature and is discerning enough to tell the difference between the assembly election and a Lok Sabha election. And off-record officers often cite this example of Odisha, which often goes to elections with Lok Sabha, and yet the results for both us, for its assembly and Lok Sabha, are pretty different.
And in the end, we talk about an arrest of a Pakistani man who became an Indian citizen 17 years ago and who has now been arrested for spying. The man in question is Labshankar Duryodhan Maheshwari. When we spoke to Indian Express's Rijit Banerjee, he told us how Maheshwari ended up in India.
Labshankar Duryodhan Maheshwari was originally from Pakistan, and he arrived in the Tarapur town in Gujarat's Anand district in 1999 with his wife for basically having a fertility treatment. So basically, he applied for a long-term visa with the support of his in-laws, and basically he came here and became a successful businessman, running a grocery store and renting out multiple stores and a house in Tarapur.
He says that it was in 2006 that Maheshwari became an Indian citizen. However, last week, the Gujarat Anti-Terrorism Squad arrested him for allegedly helping Pakistani intelligence agents in obtaining information about the Indian army. Rijit explains that the entire affair started in 2022 when Maheshwari required a visa for Pakistan.
He basically contacted his cousin for help with the visas in 2022 for coming to Pakistan after he obtained his Indian citizenship. And after that, Maheshwari, he traveled to Pakistan with his wife as well. He got visas for his sister and niece using the same contact, the same guy, and is believed to be basically, cultivated by Pakistani agents during the processing of his Pakistani visa. During a 6-week stay with his parents, he's believed to basically have been in touch with the Pakistani intelligence agency as well.
He says that when Maheshwari's sister was going to Pakistan, the person who arranged the visa for her asked her to deliver a SIM card to Pakistani agents. And this person was actually Maheshwari's cousin.
So Maheshwari got in touch with his basically cousin, and the cousin, according to the ATS people, got in touch with another person who is still unknown at this point, and that person was in constant touch with the Pakistani operatives. So yeah, this is how the SIM went from India to Pakistan, and then the whole operation happened.
And the operation that Rijit is talking about involved using the SIM card to infiltrate into the Indian Army's database.
It was used by Pakistani intelligence or operators there to basically hack into the phones of defense personals. In the point that, according to them, they got military intelligence, which says that they detected a nefarious campaign running by an Pakistani intelligence operative. So they were using this Indian WhatsApp number to compromise Android mobile handsets of serving defense personnel, mostly having wards studying in different army public schools across the country, by luring them to install certain malicious Android applications, mostly under the grab of Har Ghar Tiranga, the campaign. So this was around the third week of July, and basically they asked the people, to install the application and upload their wall photo with the national flag on the application to participate in competition. However, through that, they acquired a significant amount of information pertaining to students and their guardians, of course, of the army schools through old and existing vulnerabilities in the latter's website. And also there's an Android application called DG Camps, which is normally used for paying fees. These are the schools that come under the Army Welfare Education Society, and which is a private body supported by the Indian Army. So basically, through this, the Pakistani operator infected the phones with remote access Trojan malware, which basically gives them the access to entire gallery, entire phone logs, everything. Basically, it just gives them all the information from this.
And he says because this information was received by the Gujarat ATS, they were successful in nabbing Maheshwari.
Maheshwari was booked under espionage and under sections of the Information Technology Act. He was remanded to a 7-day custody after arrest, according to the ATS. Now, currently, the ATS, along with other agencies, are keeping watch on those who are on long-term visas and having contacts to Pakistan and also traveling to Pakistan.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.